It may be that I overslept this morning, but let's begin with the Chancellor, who I think resembles Tom Cruise in Risky Business. I was having this dream last night, back in the living room, tidying the cushions, polishing the shelves, and hoping nobody notices that the egg is no longer in pride of place. Rachel Reeves is smoothing the carpet, straightening the lampshade, and announcing triumphantly today that inflation is now back to where it was before she messed everything up. This is not quite the victory lap she imagined. It's more like saying, look, the fire I started has finally gone out, while the wallpaper still smoulders quietly behind her. Meanwhile, London and the South East are about to be clobbered by what is reassuringly called a threshold freeze, but it is, in truth, a fiscal boa constrictor that she is going to release. Nearly 500,000 more people dragged into the 40% tax band, not because they are richer, but because the Chancellor has discovered that pretending inflation does not exist is a tidy way to raise revenue without admitting she is raising taxes. It is the oldest trick in the Treasury Handbook, usually tucked into an appendix labelled stealth. On the one hand, we have a capital city still struggling with fragile growth, rising joblessness, higher housing costs, and businesses that feel battered by everything from energy prices to transport disruption. On the other, Miss Reeves is planning a picking pockets in the tube sort of budget, just after the Artful Dodger has finally left Oliver. He was excellent, by the way. Small raids everywhere, a little nibble at EVs, some trimming of pension salary sacrifice, a possible mansion tax, and a prolonged fiscal frost on threshold levels that will hit London disproportionately. London's workers are not being ambushed because they are wealthy, they are being ambushed because they earn in pounds but spend in London, which is rather... It's quite a different condition from earning in pounds and spending in Stoke. The Chancellor knows this. She also knows the capital generates the lion's share of tax revenue. It is easier to share the sheep closest to Westminster. Reeves appears almost giddy that the CPI has dropped to 3.6%, though, let's be honest, this is not a miracle. It is the mathematical equivalent of last year's energy spike, quietly slipping out of the 12-month calculation. Food inflation remains stubborn, services inflation remains sticky, wage growth exceeds productivity, and the ONS notes that the downward move is less a sign of strength and more a sign of the economy cooling like an unloved pudding. It is not time for dancing in socks across the wooden floor. Even the Bank of England, which may cut rates in December, is not celebrating. It is squinting anxiously at the broader picture: subdued growth, rising unemployment, and savings eroded by interest rates that still lag behind the price level. A rate cut might ease mortgages, but it will still simultaneously erode savings returns. That is not a victory, it is a trade-off. Reeves is finalising the budget after a week of psychodrama in Downing Street, a feared coup, whispered manoeuvres, Wes Streeting supposedly being kneecapped by number 10, and a Prime Minister beginning to look as though he is holding onto authority with both hands and one elbow. In such a setting, the budget becomes not an economic statement but a stabilising ritual, the political equivalent of a nervous family dinner where everyone is pretending nothing happened at lunch. The Chancellor, therefore, needs her numbers to work. She needs them to look sober, tough, prudent, and, above all, not inflationary. She cannot raise taxes, so she freezes thresholds. She cannot impose sweeping reform, so she opts for a smorgasbord of little tax nips and pinches, and she announces that falling inflation is proof of her competence, despite it having very little to do with anything she has actually done. The real danger is that London and the South East, Britain's economic engine, will be taxed like a luxury while being treated like a target. Dragging 480,000 more people into the higher rate will not fill the Treasury coffers with champagne bubbles. It will sap consumption, depress confidence, and leave households with less disposable income at precisely the moment the economy needs them to spend. There is a faint absurdity to celebrating inflation falling while simultaneously designing a budget that, through various levies and freezes, will increase the cost of living for many. The Chancellor is congratulating herself for extinguishing the flames, even as she douses the city with icy water. And so, let's return to the image of Rachel Reeves in her stockings. She is indeed sliding around, singing wildly, proclaiming that everything is under control. But the truth is this: the budget is a cover-up for the fact that the egg is cracked. The threshold freeze is not clever policy but a confession. London is not being protected but squeezed, and the faint chant of inflation is falling should not detract or distract us from the deeper truth that the economy is weakening, the labour market is cooling. The Chancellor is using this moment to tighten the tax net in ways that will deepen the strain. The threat to London is not dramatic, it is cumulative. It is the soft erosion of disposable income, the slow tightening of fiscal screws, the gradual drift of professionals into higher brackets without higher living standards. And it's all being wrapped in a narrative of cautious optimism that, like the risky business performance, is great showmanship but not a real story. In short, the music is playing but nothing has been fixed, and the egg, I fear it's not on the shelf, it's not on the mantelpiece, it's not above the fireplace, it's behind the sofa with a hairline fracture, waiting for the next budget to finish the job.